Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is Hart. Hope you guys had a great night off of NBA DFS tonight. I sure did after what Karl Anthony Towns did to me yesterday. Pause. It was egregious. I'll just say that. But my name is Hart. For those of you that are new, I'll be breaking down this 14-game NBA slate. Absolutely massive slate here for Wednesday night. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. I'll be talking through all my favorite plays, my value plays, my core plays, as well as building a potential lineup for you guys here tomorrow night. So make sure to hit that like button and let's get right into it. So I always like to start off with the game totals just to get a better sense of like what games we kind of want to target. So as we can see here, the first two games are great. Washington Wizards and Hornets should be a close game there, 3-point spread, 241.5 game total. That is very high. And then the next one is even higher. Jazz Pacers, 6.5-point spread, 244.5 game total. So those are two great games to get a few pieces from. That should be a very high scoring games there. Celtics 76ers, 2-point spread, 227.5. Excuse me, 227. Clippers Nets, 4-point spread, 228. Spurs Knicks, 9-point spread, 224.5. Suns Bulls, 1-point spread, 221. Lakers Rockets, 2.5-point spread, 218. As you can see, these games are getting lower and lower in terms of game total. Heat Grizzlies, 1.5-point spread, 219 game total. Pistons Bucks, 12-point spread, so a lot of blowout risk there. 227 game total. Pelicans Timberwolves, 7.5-point spread, 219 game total. Cavs Thunder, 2.5-point spread, 229.5 game total. Raptors Mavs, 5.5-point spread, 224.5. Warriors Nuggets, 3.5-point spread, 227.5. And then Blazers Kings, 7.5-point spread, 220. So absolutely massive slates. I will have also a more in-depth breakdown, kind of right up on my Patreon, which you guys can find linked down below, as well as my core plays, my updated core plays, because there's going to be a ton of news that will change the slate for tomorrow. And we've already been starting to get some. So make sure to always stay updated with the injury news. So starting off here with Utah and Indiana. For the Utah side, as we saw, it's a great game total. So, it'd be smart to kind of get at least one or two pieces from these first two games if you want to kind of go the chalky route. And obviously, Lauri Markkanen, I'm sure he'll get some ownership, but he's usually pretty contrarian. I mean, he's kind of priced about right, 8,700. You're not really getting him at a discount, but still, he has massive upside. He can easily go for 50 plus, as we saw here versus the Clippers, good defensive team. Here versus the Nuggets, 57 points there. So it really doesn't matter the matchup. Just comes down to can he hit his shots, and he should usually get there. So I like him as a contrarian spin up option. Clarkson does feel a little bit too cheap here. It just comes down to it. No, can he hit his shots? If he can, he does have some upside into the high 30s and even to the 40s if he's scoring the ball really well. So I think it's a fine play there. Collins, another fine play, kind of just a mid-range play there. Kessler is questionable. Obviously, if he misses, that'd just be more minutes to a guy like Lauri. He's already seen huge minutes. Maybe they start Olynyk, who would be a really solid play there. As you can see, he's super productive, 4,500. So I'd have a lot of interest in him if there's no Kessler. Horton Tucker's just kind of there for me. Minutes haven't been too great there. Sexton, I guess he's a fine value, played 4,000. They did drop his price a little bit there. Kent George should be good to go. He'll get guard minutes off the bench as well. So they're just playing a lot of guards here with George, Sexton, and Dunn. Obviously, I think I feel the safest with Sexton. On to Indiana here. Tyrese is finally priced up about right, 9,800. Fantastic matchup. So I don't mind him as a spend up. I do slightly prefer getting into some other spin ups just because they seem a little bit safer, even though he's literally averaging a double monster numbers here. But yeah, I think he's a fine play here. Turner priced about right. Don't mind him here. If he stays out of foul trouble and he's aggressive, he should absolutely smash that price tag. So it's a good matchup here for him. But Hield, Brown, Mathurin, they're all kind of there, priced about right. No real interest in me for those guys. And off the bench, we'll also see guys like Nemhard, Naismith there. It's just they play a lot of these, shooting guard, small forwards. So it doesn't really, no one really stands out. You really don't want to get to any of these guys. Even as like last pieces in, maybe Jalen Smith, he's been super productive, but his minutes are just all over the board right now. So it's really hard to trust any of these guys for the Indiana side besides the main two guys. Washington and Charlotte. Washington, I really like Kuzma and Poole. We've kind of seen Kuzma flash some upside here the first few games of the season. As you guys can see, 44.5 in a blowout there against Philly. In another blowout, where did it go? Versus Boston there. He's off to a great start. But yeah, I mean, he's been pretty solid. Priced about right. I just am interested in him here in this matchup. Same thing with Poole. Really hasn't flashed his ceiling above 40 yet, but we know he has that upside. I expect him to be a little bit more aggressive here. He's kind of toned down the shooting after that second game. But we know with Poole, he's a guy who likes to shoot the ball. So really good amount of interest in those two guys. Then he's just kind of there for me. As you can see, he's pretty productive. But you're not really getting him at a discount at 5,900. Tyus Jones, kind of there. Minutes did go up a little bit there versus Philly, but still, minutes are a little bit suspect. Gafford is always in play at his price tag. If he sees 30 minutes, as you can see, he has good upside. I mean, he gets a lot of blocks, but that also leads him to a lot of foul trouble. So that's the risk there. It's pretty risk reward with him, but I don't mind if you land on him. Probably be my third favorite play behind, Kuzma and Poole. That's really it. I mean, Kuzma, or I guess Kispert could be a dart throw play there. They'll mix in some right, by law, but nothing too crazy. On the Charlotte side here, LaMelo Ball still feels a little bit too cheap here at his price tag, 8,900. Coming off a monster game there. I'm expecting him to be pretty high owned, but for good reason. I mean, if he just hits his shots, we know he has triple-double upside pretty much every game. His started off the season super, super rough. Started off this last game against Dallas, if you guys weren't watching. I think he had like maybe 5 points at halftime. I mean, he was just god-awful, and then he absolutely went off there, especially in the fourth quarter. I think he had 23 points. So he's really struggling with his shot, but still really, really like that price tag in this matchup here against Washington. Terry Rozier is also out, so that should just solidify even more minutes for LaMelo Ball there. Really like Gordon Hayward. He's kind of been like the number 2 there in terms of like point forward. As you can see, his minutes are really, really solid right now, mid-30s minutes. Shooting the ball a ton the past 2 games there. So if he can keep that up, really, really like his upside there at 6,600. I think PJ Washington's a pretty solid play as well. If he stays out of foul trouble, he's another guy that can go for 25, 30 plus at 6,300. It's a pretty solid price tag. Same thing with Mark Williams. So I do have a good amount of interest in all of these guys here in Charlotte just because they kind of feel a little bit too cheap. I'm assuming they'll start Brandon Miller again. He jumped into the starting lineup there with no Rozier last game. It was pretty bad, but he did play 36 minutes. And he's a guy, if he gets hot, as you can see here versus Brooklyn, he can easily go for 30 plus. So good amount of interest in all of these starters for Charlotte off the bench. Nick Richards would be more so of a contrarian play there. Minutes are starting to creep up a little bit. Theo Maledon, I think, is a pretty solid value here. He should see about 15 plus minutes. I don't mind getting into him. And that's really it. Moving on to Boston here versus Philly. Should be a great game to watch. Nothing too crazy in terms of DFS. I do like the price tag in Tatum still. Obviously, the heart and soul of this offense, he's been very, very good so far this season, averaging 50 per game. I do think he's a little bit too cheap at 10.3. Brown is priced about right. I never go out of my way to play him, even though he does have some upside. Porzingis is there. I still think Holiday is slightly too cheap, but now that Derek White is probably back, not a lot of interest in these like secondary pieces. I really just prefer getting to Tatum. If you land on any one of the other starters, I don't mind it. I think maybe White would probably be my favorites, even though he's probably the most boomer bust. And off the bench, they'll play Horford, or a little bit of Cornette, Pritchard, Hauser. Nothing too crazy there in terms of value. On the Philadelphia side, it does feel like Embiid's a little bit too cheap, but going against Boston, I'm sure he'll have a solid game there. But you don't feel great because Boston is pretty solid defensively. Sorry, just adjusting my chair here. It just keeps slightly falling down. Maxey, I still think is too cheap here at this price tag, 8,200. Going up against a pretty tough defensive matchup against Derek White as well as Drew Holiday. So maybe that keeps his ownership down. But as you can see, he's been fantastic so far this season, averaging almost 50 per game, and he's $2,000 cheaper than a guy like Tatum. So do have a great amount of interest in Maxey right now at that price tag. I think Tobias Harris is a pretty solid mid-range play, but still, I think I'd rather get to like a Gordon Hayward, who's a little bit cheaper there, or PJ Washington. Similar price tags and kind of similar ceiling. Oubre, a little bit too score independent for me, but he's a fine play at 6,300. I mentioned Melton. He does have some upside, even though he hasn't been the best recently, and that's really it. Moving on to the Clippers here. Not a lot of interest here in the Clippers. They're all going to be very contrarian plays just because, with the addition of Harden, surprisingly they lost that last game, but he played 31 minutes. It's just, all the upside right now is kind of condensed with all those stars. So I really don't have a ton of interest here in these guys. I'm sure one of them will go off, as I always say. I prefer Kawhi. It's his team still, but yeah, everyone's kind of priced about right. It's maybe a little bit too expensive, and they're still trying to figure out all their roles. I think Zubac is a fine, dart throw play. Bones is a decent play off the bench, should play about 15 and 20 minutes. Plumlee is out, so maybe that's just more minutes to a guy like Zubac. And maybe they'll dust off a little bit of PJ Tucker, play him at center. Nothing too crazy there. It's just not a lot to like right now, just with how stacked that starting lineup is. Brooklyn side, I think they're all fine plays. Not the best matchup here going against the Clippers. Probably a slow-paced game. Two teams that are decently solid defensively. I mean, Cam Thomas, if you want to ride the hot streak here with him, I mean, this dude just absolutely chucks. Really, really good score. Not much else to say. He's been fantastic. So Don't mind if you land on him. Everyone feels priced about right. I do think Dinwiddie might be a sneaky play here if he gets aggressive. He does have some very solid upside. Royce O'Neal, DFS still, pretty solid plays there for the price tags. They still haven't really moved. I think, Royce O'Neal would probably be my second favorite play on this team. And then Lonnie Walker should be good to go. He's been, pretty solid, but he is priced up to about 5,000 there. Whoops, sorry about that. Yeah, not a lot of interest here in this game at all. Moving on to the Spurs here versus the Knicks. For the Spurs side, I still think Victor Wembanyama is a great play. I mean, it's just one of the things you're going to deal with his minutes and foul trouble. That's the only risk there with him. But otherwise, I think you can make the argument that he's too cheap for his price tag just with the ceiling this dude has. It's just one of those things. That's the risk, is the minutes and the foul trouble. Moving on to Keldon Johnson. He should be good to go here. He's going to be kind of the main guy there with Devin Vassell most likely missing once again. So the offense will probably flow through Keldon Johnson. So I think he's a very solid play there at 7,200. Zach Collins does have some upside there if he stays out of foul trouble. So I do have a good amount of interest in him. He seems a little bit too cheap. Sohan's fine. Trey Jones, a little bit of interest for me. Did not see the best in terms of minutes there. Obviously, the game did blow out, but still, I think it's a fine play. If Branham does start again, I think he'd probably be, a pretty solid play there at 4,300. Off the bench, we'll see some Seti. I think he's an okay, value play at 4,200. Nothing too crazy there. He does feel a little bit pricey. And then, Devontae Graham finally saw some minutes, but I don't think we can trust that. Moving on to the Knicks here. Brunson, I mean, it's his team. So I have to say, there will be games. He's pretty scoring dependent, as you can see here. I mean, his ceiling really only comes when he goes off for 30, 35, 40 plus points. Otherwise, he's just more so of a contrarian play. I don't love the price tag for him. I mean, he's $100 more expensive than Maxey, who has way more upside there just with scoring the ball, assists. He's better at getting rebounds right now. So yeah, I really don't get the price tag there for Brunson compared to Maxey. I mean, I'm going to slam Maxey all day over Brunson. Randall, I actually don't mind him as a contrarian play here. He's been god-awful. He's getting dragged on Twitter. But as you can see, he still has solid upside for a guy who just really hasn't been able to shoot the ball. Did a little bit better last game, 43% about. So I don't mind him. There's a contrarian play here. And a really solid matchup. He should be super aggressive here against the Spurs. Barrett's a fine mid-range play. I mean, his upside, as you can see from last game, he's just very up and down. Quickly, he's fine off the bench. The minutes are a little up and down now that Barrett is back. Mitchell Robinson always has that upside if he can stay out of foul trouble, as we saw last game, went off for 41. So I think it's a fine play there. And now that Barrett's back, these guards off the bench, a little bit too pricey for me. Maybe you can get to Grimes, but yeah, not a lot of interest there for the Knicks, really at all. On to Miami here. I like Tyler Hero. He's just been super aggressive. Minutes are good. He's, as you can see, he's shooting the ball about 20 times a game. He's been great at getting assists, rebounds. So a lot of interest in here for Tyler Hero. As you can see from his box score, he's just been very impressive so far this season. I'm sure I'll play him tomorrow and he'll probably go for 20 fantasy points, 2 of 20 from shooting the ball. But still, I mean, you can't argue with what he's been doing opportunity-wise and usage-wise. So I do like loading up on him. Bam had a great game last game. 73 fantasy points. A little bit of an outlier there, 22 and 20 game against the Lakers. But still, he has solid upside. Don't mind him. Jimmy is questionable, but he should be good to go. A little bit of a quiet season so far for Jimmy. So I would assume he's going to start turning on here in a little bit. But yeah, I think it's a fine play. I'd rather just get to Hero or Bam over Jimmy right now. Lowry's there, but he's kind of in the backseat in terms of offense. Richardson, I think, is a pretty strong value off the bench. Minutes aren't the best, hasn't been the most aggressive, but if he's going to see 20 plus minutes, I think at 4,400, he's a fair play. Same thing with Kevin Love. He really hasn't been playing much, but he did not appear in the past 2 games. So I'm not really sure what's going on here. I'm not really sure what's going on here with Kevin Love. A little bit of an interesting situation there. Not sure what to make of that. It looks like, Thomas Bryant's been getting the backup center minutes, and they're giving some minutes to Highsmith. So monitor that situation, because if Highsmith starts again, I guess you could get to him at 3,600. Wouldn't love it, but he's seen 20 plus minutes in the past 2 games. Memphis, still the offense is going to flow through Bane, Jackson Jr., and Smart. I think they're all fine plays there. Tillman is out, so it'll be interesting to see who starts. Biyombo did last game, played 26 minutes. He is pretty productive, but another one of those guys that can get in massive foul trouble, especially guarding Bam. So that's the risk there. If you think he stays out of foul trouble, I really like him at 5,100. Should be a super popular play, but guarding Bam, that might be a tough task for him there, but he is pretty productive. In terms of the other guys here, Zion Williams, I don't like going to him now that Santi's back. Santi should see, he should be like the main scorer off the bench. 20 minutes, 25 plus minutes. I'd say 20 to 25 minutes there for Santi. 4,800. I think is a solid play there for the guy. If you don't want to get to one of the starters, I think that's a solid play off the bench there. I still think Luke Kennard is way too cheap here. As I said, he has a pretty solid ceiling there if he hits his threes, and he did that last game. 32 minutes, 27 fantasy points, only 4,000 still. I mean, they're going to need his scoring. They're really struggling scoring the ball. So once again, I really like Luke Kennard there. The risk reward is just him hitting the shots. Moving on to Phoenix in Chicago here. Phoenix, Durant looks like a great spend up. Booker is out. Beal might be back. If he's not on minutes limit, absolutely love that price tag. But if he is limited to around 20, 25, even 30 minutes, I think it'd be a solid play, but nothing too crazy. Nurkic, I still think it's a very solid play. Gordon, Allen, price about right. Same with Eubanks. Nothing really sticks out to me right now. I mean, these guys are all fine if you land on them. They're going to see a good amount of minutes. Out of the guards, really like Allen and Gordon. I think Nurkic is a pretty solid contrarian play. And obviously, if there's no minutes on Beal, absolutely love him. But if there is, probably not going to land there. And Durant seems like a solid spend up. Bulls wise, they all still feel a little bit too cheap here. DeRozan, Vooch, Zach. I think Vooch is the safest. Zach is the second. And then DeMar DeRozan is probably the most boomer bust. Haven't really seen a huge game from him yet, but they all feel a little bit too cheap. Kobe White is seeing the minutes in the shot attempts. It just comes down to, can you get those other peripheral stats? If you can, he should be a pretty solid play there at 5,300. Crusoe should be good to go here. I guess he's a fine value play off the bench. He's very, very boomer bust. Torrey Craig, an okay value play. If he starts again, he's just there. That's really it. Drummond's there, Patrick Williams, they'll sprinkle some minutes to those guys, but nothing crazy. On to Cleveland here. Donovan Mitchell, price about right. Mobley, same thing. I still feel like, Darius Garland and Allen are too cheap here, but it still feels like they're on kind of sort of a minutes limit here. Only 30 for Garland in that last game. And then same thing for Allen. He's only seen about 30-ish minutes as well. But I still think they both feel a little bit too cheap. So those two would be my targets. Okoro is out, so that's probably just more minutes for a guy like Karis LeVert off the bench. A little bit more to Strus there, who's a guy who can randomly have those, pop-off games. So I guess a little bit of interest here for the Cavs, but nothing too crazy. For OKC, I absolutely love SGA. It does feel sometimes, kind of hard to click him at 10.4K, but he's just been fantastic here. And he gets absolute Swiss cheese matchup here against Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Two guards that can't really guard, and they just trying to fix my chair. And Okoro is out, so that's their main defender who would probably be on SGA. So absolutely love SGA here in this matchup if you can pay up for him. I think the next solid play would be Chet Holmgren, another one of those guys. As you can see, he's 3 straight games, 40 plus. Price really hasn't moved. Not the best matchup going against Allen and Mobley, but if you want to ride a hot streak there, don't mind it. Jalen Williams feels priced about right now that SGA is back. Don't love that. Dort is questionable. If he's out, I'm assuming they'll probably just move Cason Wallace into the starting lineup. He'd be an okay play, nothing too crazy there. It doesn't really change much. Maybe it just means a little bit more minutes. A guy like Isaiah Joe off the bench. Maybe they go big here just because the Cavs have some size there with Mobley and Jared Allen. Maybe they switch Jalen Williams into the starting lineup. I just get a little bit more size there alongside Chet. That could happen. If that happens, I wouldn't mind Jalen Williams at 4,000. Not the best point per minute guy, but he should see some solid minutes there if that does happen. Pelicans, I think they're all fine. CJ is still out, so they did move Jordan Hawkins in the starting lineup, and he absolutely went off there for a 50 bomb against Denver, which is crazy to see. But I guess that's the kind of upside we'll see with Jordan Hawkins. If he can really hit his shots, he has massive upside. If not, he's a pretty low floor. So that's the risk with him. I don't mind him there. Matt Ryan will see some minutes off the bench, another super dependent scoring guard. J Val's always a contrarian play there. It just the minutes are all over the place, very foul prone. I still really like Brandon Ingram here. Still feels a little bit too cheap. Shot it 22 times. Didn't do a ton there, peripheral stat wise, but still he has massive upside there. So I still really like him. Zion's a fair play. Anthony Edwards looks a great play. It's pretty much been his team. As you guys can see, massive upside there. So I really like him. Rudy Gobert, 41 minutes. That's massive minutes for Rudy Gobert. I think it's a fine play. He hasn't really flashed his ceiling yet, but we know he can go for 40, 50 plus. So don't mind if you want to land on him. I like Naz Reid. He's been super, super productive off the bench there. So he does feel kind of slightly too cheap at 4,600, even though his minutes aren't always guaranteed. And that's really it. Jaden McDaniels starts off 45 minutes. Before then, he was kind of limited. Obviously, they've been kind of been blowing out teams, so he hasn't seen the full allotment of minutes. So I actually really like Jaden McDaniels here. He should start, and he should see probably, I'd assume, 25, 30 plus minutes guarding Brandon Ingram. So not really sure what's going on with the pricing here. He's not going to be too aggressive offensively, but he can hit threes and he can get a lot of defensive stats. So not really sure what's going on with that pricing for him. Detroit here versus Milwaukee, not the best matchup, huge blowout risk here. So I think, Cade's fine. Asar has been fantastic in terms of peripheral stats. Don't mind if you land on him. Duran is questionable. If he's good to go, I like him as a contrarian play, but obviously not the best matchup going against Brook Lopez and Giannis, but he is there. Stewart, fine. Killian Hayes had a massive game here, but it's, you can't chase that. Ivy and Burks are questionable. So I think my favorite play right now would probably be Sasser off the bench there, 45 minutes. Not going to shoot the ball a ton. Hopefully gets 10 shots. If you can hit him, he can go for 25 plus, as you can see here, these 3 straight games. And if it blows out, you should see even more minutes. So I think he's probably my favorite play there off the bench right now is going to be Sasser. Bagley should start if there's no Duran. He'd be an okay value play. And that's really it. Roden, I will mention him. He'll play a few minutes, but yeah, they're not really playing a ton off the bench, but there is a lot of blowout risk. It looks like they went to Umude as the number 2 off the bench alongside Sasser. So you can definitely take a shot at that if you think this game blows out. So I actually do like those guys down there. Milwaukee, I'll price about fine. Dame feels a little bit too cheap. Giannis is fine. It's a great matchup here, so I wouldn't be surprised if they both go off. Middleton has some upside. Portis, nothing really stands out to me there for Milwaukee. On to the Lakers here. A pretty solid matchup here for Anthony Davis if he is good to go. But if he is out, obviously this is kind of the big news now because the Lakers are super depleted once again. They still have Gabe Vincent out, Vanderbilt's still out. Rui might be back, which obviously if he's back, 3,900, I'd really like him, especially if there's no Anthony Davis. They'd probably move Christian Wood to the starting lineup, and he's just been not the best, but still. That'd be a little bit too cheap there for Wood at 5,100. They'd really need people to step up offensively. So I have a lot of interest here in the Lakers. They're very, very depleted right now, even with Ruiz still most likely being back. But yeah, that Anthony Davis news is huge because if he's out, we're going to want to load up on at least 2 or 3 Lakers here. D'Lo, Reeves. Reeves got me a triple-double last night, but it didn't really matter because Karl Towns absolutely screwed me. But a lot to like here for the Lakers. Stay updated here with the Anthony Davis news. Houston, don't love the matchup here. They all feel priced about right. Nothing too crazy for me. Tate is pretty solid value there, but doesn't really have too high of a ceiling. And then Eason is back, so it'll eat into kind of these minutes for a guy like Tate. Maybe a little bit for Brooks. So nothing too crazy here in terms of minutes. Eason, they said it should probably see about 15. So don't think you need to really force anything on the Houston side. Sengun has pretty solid upside. I'd like him a lot more if there was no Anthony Davis. For Toronto, it's Scotty Barton's team. His price is moving up to kind of where it should be. He should still probably be a 9.5K player just for how well he's been playing. But yeah, they're all kind of priced about right. I still have some interest in Schroeder because of that double-double upside. Podol is there. OG does feel slightly cheap. But yeah, they're all kind of priced about right. Boucher, I guess, is a decent dart throw value play. But nothing too crazy here in terms of the Toronto guys. Dallas, same thing. All priced about right. You have Hardaway Jr., who's kind of the scorer off the bench there. Lively, if he can stay out of foul trouble, should see mid-20s, 30s minutes and can be productive when he's out there. But that's really it. Grant Williams is shooting the ball very well, 5,000. If you want to ride the hot streak there with him. Powell, solid value there, but nothing too crazy. It really only depends if Kleber's in or out. If he's in, I actually wouldn't mind getting to Kleber if he's, not at a minutes limit. But yeah, nothing too crazy there. Golden State, Steph, I think it's a solid spot for Steph. Clay, we know the upside there with him. He's a GPP play. Chris Paul, his price is coming down a little bit. Don't mind him. Green would probably still be my favorite play here. He's still been on a minutes limit around 30. But yeah, if he's good to go, I like him there at 6,200. If he's not, then I do really like going to Kuminga here. Sarge has been fantastic off the bench. He's just been super efficient. So at 4,400, if you think one of these guys, if Looney gets in foul trouble against Jokic, they're probably going to need Sarge out there. So actually, I do have a decent amount of interest in Sarge. That's really it there for Golden State. Denver, Jokic should be to go. He's a great spend up. Murray is out, so they did start Reggie Jackson. Played 24 minutes there. Nothing too crazy. You would have liked to see a little bit more. The game did blow out a little bit, but yeah, the minutes weren't the best there for him. Probably a little bit more, point forward for a guy like Aaron Gordon, who they do like. So I don't mind him there. His assist number should go up a little bit, but it does feel a little bit too pricey for him. Everyone else is kind of priced about right. Nothing too crazy there. Peyton Watson, I guess, is fine value. And then moving on to the last game here, Portland versus Sacramento for the Portland side. Brogdon feels priced about right finally right now. I mean, as you can see, his minutes have been huge, shooting the ball a ton. So I still think he's a very solid play. I mean, he's pretty much like Tyrese Maxey and Tyler Hero right now. Seeing a ton of minutes, heavy usage, shooting the ball a ton, massive upside there with the rebounds and assists. So really like Brogdon there. Sharp, same thing. He's kind of like a mini Brogdon in terms of, he's going to get rebounds, he's going to get assists, and he's going to shoot the ball a ton. See a ton of minutes. So a lot of interest in those two. Aiton's more of a contrarian play there. Same with Grant's. Nothing too crazy. Scoot is still out. Obviously, they lost Robert Williams, so they will go to guys like probably Jabari Walker. Will probably see the backup center run. So 3,200, I think, is a very solid play there. Same thing with Mays. He'll probably see about 15 minutes. Same thing with Kamara. He'll probably see low 20s minutes. So a lot of interest here in this value plays for the Portland Trailblazers, and I do have a ton of interest there in Brogdon and Sharp. For Sacramento, Sabonis looks like a great spend up. Murray has not been shooting the ball well at all, but he does have solid upside there. So if you can get hot, I do really like him there at 6,500 with no Monk once again, no Fox once again. Monk, I think it's a fine play. The minutes just are not the best there. So if you can get solid minutes, he can absolutely break the slate. But not really sure what's going on with his minutes. Herter just so up and down. But if you can catch him at the right time, he has massive upside there. Davion Mitchell's a fine play there. Seeing mid-20s minutes. Not a ton stands out for me on the Kings. It's really, if you want to pay up, go to Sabonis. He's a fantastic play. Otherwise, Murray and Monk, it's just very, very, boom or bust with those guys. So that is the breakdown for you guys. As I mentioned, if you guys want to check out my Patreon, check it out, down below. Hit that like button, and let's finish this lineup here for you guys real quick. So for forward, I do like getting to, I wanted to go to Portland here. Do like Sharp there, as I mentioned. You're going to see massive minutes. Want to see him closer to 20 shot attempts, but great at rebounding, rating and assists. Can get some peripheral stats with his steals and blocks as well. So absolutely love him here. Just comes down to can he hit his shots. And then for 3,700 left over for power forward. As I mentioned, there'll be good amount of value across the board today, kind of with how injuries fall and kind of show up. So right now, I think Batum on Philadelphia did see some minutes, some solid minutes. 3,300. He saw 17 last game, so I guess you can throw him into that value play dart throw contention. But to finish out this lineup here for power forward, let's just go with we will go to Portland. Let's go with Jabari Walker there. I think it's a solid play. Should see about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more there if there's some foul trouble with Ayton. That is the early look build. As always, stay updated with the news. Follow me on Twitter. Check out my Patreon for updated core plays. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.